How's it going, hockey fans? Thank you for tuning in to the Post Huggers podcast. Goldie, how goes it today, my friend?
It's going good, Feeling a little bit lighter. Shaved off the beard for the first time in a really long time, and feeling pretty good. How are you doing yourself, Steve?
Still giggling at your attempts at bearding, Goldie. It's You'll get there one day, bud. You'll get there one day.
Yeah, right.
I'm dodging 110-degree temps here in Phoenix, so went outside once, and that was one too many times. But I get to look forward to 3 straight hours outside here in about an hour and a half, so it's not going to be pretty. But Let's talk about ice. Who do we got between the pipes today?
Well, between the pipes today, we have our defenseman from the Stony Brook Seawolves, Andrew Mancini. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, of course. We've wanted to get you on since the beginning of this podcast was first created. It was really our idea to have you on within the first couple episodes, so we're glad that you could finally hop on with us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So, Andrew, I'm going to throw this out to you right away. What don't you do to opposing players in front of your goalie?
A lot of things.
The correct answer is shove that player on top of your goalie. But hey,
well,
there's a lot of things.
Yeah, no, Cini.
Apparently, in my time, I've quote unquote done many things that I wasn't supposed to do that I've never heard of before.
Yeah.
Well, goalie's there to give you lectures on that anyway.
Yeah. No. Usually I'm singing his praise, but so Cini, tell us a little bit about your hockey life. Tell our viewers a little bit how you got into hockey and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So years ago, obviously, I started playing when I was a kid, probably 3 or 4 years old. Growing up on Long Island, I played out here. I actually played our current rink, the rink. So a full circle moment for me to start playing hockey. The first time I skated was at the rinks, and here I am finishing college up right back where I started, which is pretty cool. But really, honestly, my love for the game kind of started. It came from my dad. My dad grew up across the street from a guy named Buzzy, who was stick boy for the New York Islanders back in the day. So when the Islanders would win the Stanley Cup all the time and stuff like that, he was always surrounded by it, would always be around the guys and whatnot. And, kind of had a love for hockey that way. Surprisingly, he was never an Islanders fan. Couldn't stand him. He was always a Ranger fan deep down, ever since before he was a kid. And his family was all Islanders fans. So that's where the mold came for me to love New York. But it really started from him, then taking me to games, obviously, as a kid, going to MSG and stuff like that, kind of find that love for it. And then, played house league as everyone did, and then worked my way up, played travel, and still kicking it now 23 years later.
Yeah, no, definitely kicking it. So definitely is a real cool full circle moment there to really start your career at the rinks. And now, you're not going to end your career at the rinks, but your college career will end at the rinks, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So what made you decide to become a defenseman? Is that what you always played, or did you transition into it at some point?
No, actually, I don't know if I would say this is kind of forced, but this is actually a pretty funny story. I was always a center. I played center my whole life, up until I was probably till 18, like right before I left to go to prep school. And my 15th year, before I left, I remember we were playing. I'll never forget this. We were playing at the Wichenden School up in Massachusetts. And I would overhandle the puck so much. I was always lengthy. I had like a growth spurt when I was like younger pretty quickly. So I was always relatively tall. And my stick was always huge, always up to like my nose, my forehead. Like it was brutal. Like it was horrible. Couldn't handle the puck for the life of me. Like didn't have any of that like skill or none of that. Sitting on the bench, my coach takes my stick and launches it over the bench, starts screaming at me because I mishandled the puck in like the high slot, turned around, it was a goal. I was like 15 years old, launches the stick across the bench. Next game, he's like, "You're playing D." I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Fine." He's like, "You're a defenseman. You're gonna use that stick. You can't make plays as a center. This is what you're gonna do." And here we are, however many years later. I mean, I remember going through prep school and people were like, "How long have you played D for?" I'm like, 4 years. Like that was it, 3 years. Like that's. I mean, I haven't been playing D for 10 years. It hasn't been that long. So
how did you find the transition from center to D?
I think ultimately, like I'm an offensive defenseman. That's like my role. So I think it was very easy for me to transition and kind of like start to find that game of being very active, in the play, in the rush, trying to make plays, produce offense, quarterback in the power play, running the PK unit and stuff like that. So it's very actually a simple transition. Being a center, obviously being all over the ice, supporting the puck all the time. It was kind of a simple mold. I just found more offensive game once I started kind of getting more comfortable playing D. And then obviously, going through the ranks of whatever. Once I kind of went to prep school after my second year, really, there I started to kind of figure out, what my game was and how to like use that to my advantage. And that's where things kind of started to take off from that end.
All right, that's cool. So you're actually lucky because growing up in the 80s like I did, there was offensive defensemen, but it was discouraged, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wanted you to stay home, play it safe, don't take any chances, right? And the new NHL, now the defense have to jump up into play because the teams that don't have active and engaged defense are usually in a lot of trouble in games. And the ones that have them rushing on up, it's, it makes a huge difference. And I'll cite Martin St. Louis right now with the Montreal Canadiens. He's got those D jumping up every chance he has. So it makes such a huge difference having, a defender that can not only defend, but jump up and help create goals to back up the 10D2, right? So gotta love that, Heath.
Yeah, right. So with that being said, who is an NHL defenseman or a forward for that matter that you kind of style your game after?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Growing up for a lot of my time, when I was 16 years old, I started working with a mindset performance coach who was an NHL draft pick for Chicago Blackhawks. Name is Vinny Maltz. And then he kind of started getting to the mental side of the game, and really trying to he got a group of guys and really broke down, the mindset behind, being a high performing athlete. And the biggest thing that I really learned is I was a big person in comparing myself to people. Oh, look where he is, or who's going, D1 or whatever the case is. And then through my process of learning, my biggest thing to separate myself was I have my own, my own abilities. I'm my own mold. The game that I play is unique in its own ways. I'm going to use that. And that's what kind of helped me kind of use those stepping stones. I think along the way, though, the one person that I really modeled my game after, especially through prep school that I would watch a lot of film on, was Kel McCarr. Because of how he was very shifty on the blue line. He was able to beat guys. I use my deception a lot. I love being deceptive, on the blue line, especially breaking pucks out, forcing guys to go specific ways and manipulate them. And I kind of learned a lot of that from him. And that kind of allowed me to grow my game specifically in that standpoint. And then if you want to use I'm not as fast or as good as a skater as Kel McCarr, but an Adam Fox, I'm more of a slow down type of guy. I don't like to, I take my time through things, but that also helps me be more deceptive. So it's kind of a mix between those two players that I kind of would pay attention to and, study a little bit to see, how they would utilize specific things in their game. And then kind of just, translate some of that stuff, then build off of mine.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's what every great athlete has to do, right? You pick and choose what you want to take from different athletes. I know that myself, I take things from different goalies that I've played with or, watch, and, I take what works for me and I throw away the rest. Right. And that's how you become one of the top players in your position. Kind of interesting that you picked two right-handers when you're a left-hander, but definitely two great guys to really look at and kind of model your game after. Obviously you're your own person, right? So, and you've done a great job of that. I like I said, playing behind you is super easy. So, I definitely appreciate you being manipulative in the corners and stuff like that. Makes my job a lot easier to get the puck out quickly and stuff like that. So
it also helps when your goalie's got good communication too. It goes a long way. It goes a long way.
Yeah, I yell at you guys, so it definitely helps. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So Andrew, the only thing I would like to see you do is get a little bit more Arbor Jackeye in your game, okay?
Yeah, I've been told I need to start playing like a prick sometimes, but it's so funny because it's that's just what I do works. And it's so funny how a big thing that I studied is a lot of times coaches like to say, hey, this is what I want from you. Not necessarily, it's from what they see from their point of view. And that's something behind the whole mindset culture. I won't dive into because I could go on for hours with it, but they, really say, I want to see that out of you. But at the same time, what I do works, you know what I'm saying? So it's kind of that balance where I'm a guy that utilizes my stick really well. I might not go into the corner and, blow you up or whatever the case may be. But I utilize my stick so well. I break a play super easily. I'm very effective when it comes to using my stick or hooking pucks. Like there's different ways but everybody says the same thing. It's so funny you say that. And that's actually honestly
it was actually just a joke because I just love throwing stuff like that out there.
That's so funny because a lot of people say that.
You're not wrong.
What's interesting is how many people would have said that to Lindstrom, right?
Yeah.
He was arguably one of the best defensemen to ever play the game. He wasn't super physical, right?
Yep.
He just knew his angles on players. He used his stick effectively, and he used his body to shield people, from going to the net hard. Like he was one of the most effective defensemen without having to play a gritty game at all, right? So, that's the thing is most of it is if you're just playing to please your coach, or you're not, like you said, you're not playing your game. Stick to your game, stick with what with what works, right? And then always go back, review your game tape and see where you can improve. Now, 100%. Speaking about improving, all right. Last year, a little bit of a rocky season over at Stony Brook. So what are you guys looking to do this year to shake things up and change your trajectory with the team?
Yeah, I think a big issue that we had for the past 2 years was our culture. I think I'm a big preacher in having a good culture. And throughout my years as, being a captain in prep school and becoming assistant here, that has been like my biggest focus through a lot of things. And there's been a lot of lack in that. And I think that there's been not the best job of, holding people accountable when it comes to specific things. And it's kind of difficult, when a couple people try to do it and everybody else kind of floats their own way. So a lot of work has gone in, throughout the summer and stuff like that. It's always nice to have, a lot of fresh faces. And this year is going to be one of our biggest, our largest recruiting classes. And then when you have a lot of those guys that are like, oh, it's a breath of fresh air, you get to turn the page and kind of, say, what was our biggest flaws last year? I would turn around and say that I think that our culture was 100% guys losing confidence in each other or whatever the case is, due to honest miscommunication or, not being proper communicators. Cause, that goes a long way as well as trying to help guys with, figure out their game or whatever their case is. But there's a way to do things. And that's a big thing as a leader for me is you got to talk to everybody differently. How I speak to, if I spoke to Goldie or spoke to another guy on our team, it's completely different across the board. And I think a lot of guys, as you get older, you kind of see the lack of where guys sit back and say, hey, you know what? I know that this person can handle things this way or this person can handle things another way. And I think once you figure that out and all those pieces come together, you're going to see a lot of success within that room. That's going to translate onto the ice, especially when we have such a skilled class coming in.
Yeah. Well, it's huge to have the entire locker room bought in. Right. So there's, the perfect team that I can, point you towards. Well, I'll pick out two right now. Right. Montreal Canadiens had a horrible locker room a few years ago and they blew it up. Right. And they've got a great coach who is modeling exactly what you're saying. He knows how to talk to players. Love the fact that St. Louis, if you're a rookie and you make a mistake, he doesn't bench you. Nope. He gets you back out on the ice and, because you're going to make a mistake and you have to learn from your mistakes. And that's what he wants to see. Yep. The other one was, and thank you, LA Kings, for that, to the Winnipeg Jets, but that was not a good locker room at all. And some tight people came on over from the LA Kings. They shipped some guys out. And unfortunately, I picked them to go far as the conference finals this year. Thank you, Hellebuck.
I did the same. So.
Yeah, we had high hopes for them. They were looking good, but that's a team that just completely flipped, right? From just not gelling and not playing well, not buying in to buying in and looking better. And you hit the nail on the head. You can't. This old school hard-nosed coach, it doesn't work anymore because just screaming your face off at guys doesn't work. You're going to have guys that shut you down, shut you out, and there's guys that are going to score or do their role, in spite of you, right? Yeah. Not because of you. And you can't take credit for that, right? So you're 100% correct in stating that, there's lots of people will, have different styles of learning and, different styles of, responding to feedback. So as a leader, that's a brilliant way to look at things that, really shake up your locker room this year.
Yeah, no. And I'm going to double back on what Cini said there. It really was kind of there were guys on the ship and there were guys trying to jump off the ship and there were guys who did jump off the ship. So we're all trying to keep everyone on the ship this year. That will happen. I know that Cini and I have both talked at great length about that. keeping guys, headed in the same direction rather than pulling at two ends of the rope, going in different directions and having a couple other guys pull in a third direction. So, I mean, we're all trying to pull in the right direction, which is a national title. None of us want to go out being the teams that didn't make nationals and being the only ones that didn't, out of, our picturesque look of an organization. I think we've only missed nationals like 3 times in our history. So missing the last 2 years, I think that's definitely something. I have it written on a whiteboard in my garage where I work out, and I have my gym set up. I have our record out there on a whiteboard that really just drives me to push to be the best me every day. And it's those little things that guys are doing this off season to keep the eye on the prize, because at the end of the day, we're representing Stony Brook and we don't want to, let them down at the end of the day too. So it goes deeper than just, we had a bad season, obviously, but it goes deeper than everyone on the outside knows too. So we're all working to right the ship. That's for sure.
Yep.
So Andrew, got this one for you. So when your college career is done, okay, if you can continue on in hockey, what are your ambitions? And if hockey comes to an end, what do you see yourself doing?
Yeah. So it's funny. I go back and forth with this all the time about, figuring out next year. And I made a decision that, that I'm trying to play in the East Coast League next year. So I've spoken to a lot of individuals, a lot of people to try to start opening the doors down that route. Obviously indicative of how good, of a year I personally have, of course, as you need to produce, especially trying to make a jump from the ACHA to the ECHL. But that is something that's on my board, and that I turned around and said, you know what, I'm going to give it 110%. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Luckily, we actually have a family business. My dad's an electrical contractor, and I have worked, been a part of it for, the past 5 or 6 years, doing project management and estimation and stuff like that. So if things, if that didn't work out, I'd still be, I'd turn around and say mentally, I gave everything I got. There's nothing I could have done more. No regrets type of thing. And then kind of just, start transitioning some into that.
Well, here's one thing I would throw at you, because I don't say this to many guests, though. You've got a good head on your shoulders and you really understand the game. So have you ever thought about getting behind a bench?
So here's my problem is that I can't teach little kids. I will lose patience. I have a little brother that growing up, like I would hang around, I'd practice with his team. I'd, be around with them and do whatever I could or be behind the bench. I can't do it. I have patience, but like their jaws, like, to put it this way. So like I did some work and I would work with the Long Island Girls National, their 18U national team, their 16U national team. And they have a very, very superb record with multiple guys going to the Division I level, USHL, North American League, whole 9 yards. And I had a very, very good conversation about mindset performance. They brought me in to talk about the whole mindset portion of the game. And down in that instance, I would be involved in it, but I definitely could not get behind the bench with younger kids and go through that process. I'm too competitive of a person when it comes down, like push come to shove. That's how I am. That's why, luckily, like being part of business, it's good to kind of have that edge. But I play both. I like to play both sides, devil's advocate at the same time. So like when I have to be nice, I can understand situation and control myself. Unlike some other people have a difficult time doing that, but I would not be able to do that.
What's hilarious is I actually deal better with little kids than I do older ones.
Really,
I think it's because my complete overall lack of talent. I seem a lot more talented to the younger kids than the older ones. But all joking aside, I just like watching the small improvements on little players, right?
Yeah.
When you finally see the light go off in their heads and it clicks and they actually understand a concept, right?
Yep.
But I could see you being a college coach, to be honest with you, to start things off.
That would,
because I'm just saying the way you think the game is interesting. And like you said, talking about the psychology, that's, once you start hitting a pro level, right, you have to put the work in. There's no doubt about it. But it becomes 90% mental, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, let's reference the NHL playoffs right now. Edmonton's on the ropes, and now they're in the head of the Florida Panthers, right?
Yep.
So it's about to get really, really, really interesting here in the next game. And And, that's part of it is just, Florida, if they go back to playing their game and they get their
Yep.
mental focus back, they're going to be fine.
Yep.
Because I still think the New York Rangers were a hell of a lot better team than the Edmonton Oilers. And that's not shitting on McDavid, Draisaitl, or the rest of them. The Rangers were a more complete team and Florida handled them really well, right? So here's one for you. I want your GM cap on right now.
Oh, God.
Goodrow, him being released. What do you see the Rangers doing? What do you think was behind that move? And like I said, what do you see them doing and pursuing and going after now that he's gone?
So I think at the end of the day, I think a big thing, and my friend's very involved. He's very good with understanding contracts, and he's more involved in that more than I am. But we'd have deep conversation. I think this goes all the way back down to the trade deadline, and I think Chris, everyone's expectations of what was going to happen, with Drury and the moves that he was going to make, they failed, and it's not what people wanted to see. I think that Wenberg or Rozovic or the guys that we got. There were just like minuscule pieces that honestly at the end of the day was not I think that the piece of the pie that we needed to try to win a cup, to go for that cup run, and that came down to money, and ultimately that was the issue that we have. And I think when you fast forward now, I love Goody. I love his game. I love how he plays. But I think finally, if the way that I'm viewing it, if Drury wants to start talking from a business side of things, it's a lot of money to have that fourth line guy that's going to do whatever, of how much he was worth. It hurt. It's going to take up space. But at the same time, could turn around and say, I think Trouba's he's a great leader. I've heard a lot of guys in the locker room. I know people that play for New York that say, nothing but great things about him. But to be paid the amount that he's being paid hurts. But I want to see if Drury now could go after a guy like Gensel. Like, if you're going to get rid of that, San Jose picked him up, you free up that space. Now there's an increase in the cap, obviously moving into next year too for the NHL. Gensel would be a guy that I'd like to see Drury go after.
Yeah, no, that was kind of what me and Steve were talking about on the phone a little while ago when that news all broke. And obviously Darcy Kemper is now an LA King and PLD is now a Washington Capital. They finessed that move again a couple days before he can no longer be traded anywhere. So good luck with that, Washington Capitals. But no, yeah, I think that the Rangers made that move purely to shake things up for one, and to get money to be able to shake things up and bring in a big name, and maybe even two big names. I've heard Patrick Kane's name thrown around a few times. Tyler Toffoli is another one that I've actually heard wants to be in New York with Jonathan Quick again, and they wanted him at the deadline. They just obviously, like Cini said, could not get the money to make that move. And so those are two huge names right there. If you could bring in both guys, I think it solidifies that top six in a way that the Rangers really haven't had in a hot minute. I think that the top line really disappeared in that last series against Florida. Really didn't do anything, and that rotating right winger is not helping those two at all. It's a revolving door on the right side, and maybe it's time to make the other two a revolving door too and see what can kind of stick. But yeah, no, I think that you're onto something there where it's definitely a money move, and the way that it was done where San Jose wanted him and he's, that's on his no trade list, and to be that ruthless and put him on waivers, that means that the Rangers are ready to win a cup. It's what teams do. And as unfortunate as it is for the fans who love him, it's a business at the end of the day. And you're going to do what's best for your team, and you're going to do what's best for your organization to get to that, end trophy, which everyone says is the best trophy in sports. So at the end of the day, they're going to do what needs to be done for them.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about the business aspect of things, and you're seeing that happen a lot more. I reference the Canadians a lot because, of course, huge fan of them, but loyalty contracts hurt teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's when a GM all of a sudden decides they want to reward a player for their past play. When they're starting to age out, those contracts kill you. And Montreal's gone through it too many times now. So we're seeing an end come to that, and just the way things were pulled on Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Goodrow right there, it's just showing like, hey, we got to do what we have to do to win, and you can't. That's the whole thing about loyalty. Like Mark Bergevin said it: if you want loyalty, go get a dog. because the players, you know, and in most aspects aren't super loyal to the team, as in, you know, except for you can spit out like teams like the Boston Bruins for a while that they were taking loyalty contracts, right? The players were taking a reduced hit. Sidney Crosby's great for that, by the way, too, right? He should have been one of the highest paid players in the league, and he allowed Malkin to get paid more than him, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think it kind of goes both ways that way if you want to win a championship. But the last one I'm going to throw out here for you is, what do you think Sidney Crosby should do?
It's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, there's a time where, like, and here's the battle is, like, for years, right? You look at like Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, like those were the guys, right? And then at the end of the day, now like you got guys like Connor McDavid, and the game's changed. Like, I think there was a time where like where the style of Ovechkin and Crosby was, you know, phenomenal. Then you take a Connor McDavid who's got the skill, who's got the speed, you throw it into the mix, and then you start now trying to add in these younger guys. Like, for example, like a guy I know well, like Zegras, right? You try to take those guys that have a different element to skill of the game, and you completely change everything. Like, you shift the entire game of how it used to be played, even from, you know, 2005, like even when we were kids growing up. So like what it used to be. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know what should. The guy's been in Pittsburgh for, you know, how many, like it would be like seeing Ovechkin leave Washington. Like
but you brought up, okay, so the point with Ovechkin right now is, okay, I looked at that team last year, and let's just be honest, that was a pathetic showing in the playoffs.
Oh yeah.
Like, they squeaked in. Adding Pierre-Luc Dubois did not make them a Stanley Cup contending team, let alone a playoff team. Like, somebody showed me their top six, and before I could even comment, somebody said, yeah, that's a great top six back in 2010.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you had that top six, that's looking pretty lethal, but it's not. It's an aged out one. And the interesting thing about Sidney Crosby is he's another one, you know, this huge student of the game, had his career numbers again last year, right? So he's not slowing down. He still has that ability to go around and change the outcome of a game. If Sidney Crosby wants to go do it, he can still do it. So my thing is, you know, because Coley and I will talk about this all the time, you know, playing couch potato GMs, you know, who's going to get you the most if you trade him right now? And Sidney Crosby is going to fetch you a bunch, because if you added Crosby to the Rangers next year, how good do you think you're doing?
It depends where you slot him. You could do well.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? Like, it depends. Are you putting him on that first line, or are you putting him on the second line or the third line? Like, I mean, I don't see him dropping to a third line, but like,
Here's where I have a difficult time with fitting in guys into different positions, because you turn around and you look at the Rangers. Look at like a Brady Shea, where the Rangers used to have. Like, look at all the guys that the Rangers used to have. They go into other places. Brady Shea was doing phenomenal for Carolina, as what he was doing, like compared to what he was doing in New York. Now you take like somebody like everyone says, like when Capo should have, you know, I don't know why they gave him, you know, the extension. Obviously, Chris is like, hey, this is your last shot. That's the way that I took it. This is your last opportunity to kind of see, you know, what you could provide for us. Cabo can go play somewhere else and be the best player in the NHL. Like it's so like I feel like it's so weird now. Like, that's the way that I view it. Any guy could go anywhere, yet you could have a horrible season. You could go elsewhere and you're going to be lights out. Like, that change of scenery, who you're playing with, the room that you're in, I feel it could alter so many things about an individual person's game that it's fun to watch. Like, it's so interesting to see. Like, I would love to see, like, if Capa does not have the best year, he's going to go somewhere else. I could so see him being a top guy that's going to produce in the NHL. It's just being in the right place.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the amount of pressure, right? Because New York's a market that you are a cup or bust, just like Montreal. Yep. So Canadians fans right now, I love watching them lose their minds, because it's been 3 years since we made the playoffs.
Yeah.
You know, and it's perfectly fine, because we needed to rebuild, because we would always do just enough just to squeak in without ever being really super competitive.
Oh, it all depends on where you slot them and where you put guys in the lineup and where they're playing, right? Like for, you know, Cini putting out Kakko, right? Like, he got signed, and the first thing that I'm hearing when I wake up this morning is that they're already, you know, shipping him around and trying to see if they can get a trade worked for him. And who knows who that gets back, right? Like, you know, who knows if maybe
you're going to get another player like him that has a potential high ceiling that needs a change of scenery. So
Well, who knows if that's why they made the move with Goudreau they did when they did. You know,
I mean,
you never know.
like
If they're
Buchnevich, like when Buchnevich left the Rangers, like look what he did. He wasn't he. Everyone was so hyped for him to come to New York, and he didn't do well. He just didn't do much. And then you change the scenery, and look what now everyone wants him back.
yeah, yeah. Some guys they just can't cut it under the big lights, right? It's like you see in the Toronto market where people, you know, crumble when they start going through these skids, and a lot has to do with the media, and a lot has to do with social media nowadays. And you know, maybe back in the day when trades were going on, when there wasn't social media, it may have been a lot easier to, you know, go through that slump. And at the end of the day, we all have to remember these are human beings, right? It'd be like, you know, it'd be like Cini getting traded all the way to San Diego State and having to go play over there, right? Like you don't know anybody there. Maybe he does, I don't know. But you know, yeah, no idea. So you don't know where you're living, you don't know anybody on the team. You're walking into a locker room you've never been in before. Obviously you've been in the building before, but you've been in the visitor side. There's a lot of like anxiety that goes into that. Not only trying to figure out where your kids are going to go to school, if it's a long-term deal, like all of those things.
That's where I think of some like Wenberg, for example. Not to cut you off, Goldie, but like Wenberg comes all the way from Seattle. His whole family, his wife's pregnant, already bought a house. I forget where I read it or I heard somebody told he bought a house in Greenwich, Connecticut for whatever it is. Whatever his contract, like, what do you do then? Like, you move your entire family across the country. They're going to school now in Greenwich, Connecticut, or whatever. Is your Ranger, and then now, like, what you're human at the end of the day. Like, and that's honestly, like, not to go relate, but like that was my struggle when I played in the North American League, and that's why I left it because of that reason of like the difficulty of like it became a business. And like me being a human being, like I was so young, I honestly couldn't handle it. Like that's what it came down to. Like I struggled so much of like being able to handle that business side of things, being so young that it took me so long to kind of figure that aspect out.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing you guys haven't mentioned though, and this is the one thing that I preach every time at the trade deadline, chemistry is a big thing.
Yes.
Right. How many trades do we see at a trade deadline where a big name player goes over to a team? Like Patrick Kane wasn't very effective with you guys. Now, that was an injured Patrick Kane, right? So you knew he was in tail end out, but still, it didn't really help out, right? You went after the big name, it didn't help out. The guys that, in my opinion, do the best are your utility players, right? The ones that can do a lot of things, right? So when Antoine Vermette was traded from the Coyotes over to the Blackhawks, I went, oh man, did they ever get a diamond in the rough there now? Because he could do everything. And it took him, even took him a while to get in there. But then he scored some huge goals to get to help them win that cup. But then it was also his plays off the puck, right? So sometimes it's just a chemistry thing. And you'll see, like you said, Buchnevich wasn't fitting in on the Rangers, goes elsewhere, does better. And you'll see that. It's just sometimes they find chemistry with players. What was the one off of, the Vancouver Canucks, the Russian kid that got traded over to Calgary? And in his first game, he looked like a superstar.
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name, but yeah, I know who you're.
I know I can picture him in my head right now, and sometimes that's just it. Like you just shake it up, you get different players. So you also get a different coach because I think that coach was different than talking. Just said, go play your creative game, go be you, go do your thing, and then let's see how it happens, right? Because coaching style is definitely another major factor in there.
Yeah.
So Andrew, you get your wish list right now. It's going to be Gensel. That's who you want to see on the Rangers.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good fit for us.
All right, and then you're not doing anything else with the Rangers if you're the GM.
I mean, the problem is I think the list is so big. I was like going through I was telling actually Goldie this, like the amount of players that are on that free agent list. There's a lot of good players.
It's a star-studded list. It's a star-studded list. Yeah,
and that's why it's so difficult to say because then, like you talk about chemistry, like what guy's going to come in? Like who even knows if Gensel's going to come in and fit in the mix of what we have? Like that's why it's so difficult. I honestly couldn't even be a GM because like it's even like look back and I want to go on a rant, but like Jimmy Vesey was like he was done. Like that was it. Came to New York, he had his opportunity, and he did phenomenal. Then he got this huge contract, and now he kind of just went back down to where he was. And it's like then you become. It's just such a difficult thing to figure out. But I think Gensel's a good player. I think he's a consistent player. I think then going to Carolina, he did well. I thought he fit in very well there. He, fit in his line.
Stepped up in the playoffs.
Yeah,
he was scoring goals, right?
Yeah, and that's what you need.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, we don't know what's going to happen from today to the draft. That's another big thing. And then you have to figure out who you're going to get after the draft because I don't see teams staying quiet this year at the draft. I think it's going to be a trade fest. And I think it's probably going to be picks being moved around in the top 10. I think I'm going to see there's going to be a couple teams that are going to trade out of the top 10, trade into the top 10, trade players for those top 10 picks. And it's going to, people aren't wanting to sit on it anymore, right? Especially with the new elevated cap. Teams want to have their team solidified before free agency and then make the adjustment at free agency of, hey, we couldn't get X, Y, or Z, so we need to pick up A, B, or C. So I think that's another thing that, when we're sitting here talking about this, it kind of becomes not relevant what we said today could be not relevant 2 days down the line because Gensel could re-sign somewhere. So
Yeah.
It's something where we are being very, very wishful thinking of if we were, playing NHL 24 and saw, this guy pop up and you turned off salary cap and you give him the top amount. Yeah, that's what we're basically doing here. But,
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's definitely something where we all have to, really think about it. Cause I think the Rangers aren't done. And I think they're going to make a move here in the next few days leading up to the draft. I really do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, we'll see about the draft because last year's draft was the least amount of movement. And what's interesting now, and I like what the GMs are now doing, is don't sit down and wait until draft day to start making your moves. Like start doing stuff early.
Yeah.
We would see some trickles, like I was saying to Goldie yesterday. You'd see some trickles of trades, but they were minor leaguer guys, right?
Yep.
Just solidifying your AHL roster. But now we got some bigger moves that are going on. And when the first thing when I saw Kakko getting signed, I said that's a tradable contract right there. He's locked in for a year, so that makes him, really good, trade bait at that point too. But on top of it, when Goodrow was gone, and he's a big playoff performer, right? You just went. They've already got it in mind. They know what they're doing. They've got this locked down and who they're going after, and that's the way I looked at that. Going. I think they're looking at it as their window to get some cups, and that window shrinking. So I think they're going to be really aggressive this year to go after the players they want.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And especially with a trade we have not spoke about yet is the Markstrom to New Jersey. There is a rivalry, Jersey and, the Rangers. So it's always one-upping each other and trying to be better than each other. And so
they needed a Tendy
really
bad, really bad,
really bad. And now
that's funny. You talk about the diamond in the rough too, like even sending like Ball there, right? Like he's he's a good, like when you look at how he is as a defenseman, like he's a utility guy of like, he's a good stay-at-home defenseman. So I think the Devils needed the goalie more, 100%. But Calgary's getting a good player. Like he's a good defenseman. Yeah,
no, they are. And that was something that I think they tried to get done at the trade deadline, and it kind of fizzled out. And we were hearing that Markstrom was going to go to about 8 different teams at the trade deadline. Never happened, and then it finally happens, right after. And I have a feeling that all these teams had these trades already worked up for the day after because they thought the Panthers were going to finish it at home. I don't think anyone thought the Panthers were going to let the Edmonton Oilers kind of run on them the last 2 games, and they have. So when this is obviously being put out, the Stanley Cup final will probably be over. So that's just keep that in mind with what we're saying, obviously now too. But yeah, so I definitely see that happening, but this is a great place to kind of wrap this up. Obviously, thank you so much to Andrew for coming on. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. I had a good time.
Of course. And everyone make sure to follow us on all of our social media. It's Post Huggers Pod on X and Post Huggers Podcast on everything else. X, can you please let your usernames be slightly longer by just a few characters, please? Thank you so much. This has been Heath and Steve.
Have a great one, hockey fans. And Marc-Andre Fleury, we'll have you on here someday, buddy.
Yes, and always remember to hug your post.